Do you feel like you're at the mercy of the crazy economic times of the world today? Do you want to be successful in the face of everything life throws at you? Stick around as we unpack ways you can plan for success. Welcome to Sabbath School Perspectives Lesson 8. We're so glad you could join us today. We're on Lesson 8 for Sabbath, February 25, looking at how to plan for success. We've got 3 main points for you in 90 seconds. Let's pull up our clock and get it rolling. Planning for success in the stewardship context can be illustrated with the idea of building a house. Step 1, you need to build a good foundation. A solid financial future begins with a solid education, and the future of the family and its stability begins with the choice of a godly spouse. Step 2, build a quality structure. Just as the structure of a quality house must have quality materials and workmanship, so a stable, successful existence must be built up with a life of good, honest work executed with honor, integrity, and diligence. Just always doing the bare minimum and looking for ways to do the very least will not lead to real success. You must make Christ the center of your home and never pursue financial gain at the expense of that spiritual center. Step 3, maintain the structure and don't undermine it. Just as there are certain things that you do and you don't do in order to make sure your house lasts and doesn't just crumble around your ears in neglect, there's certain principles of financial and economic stability that govern everyday life. Have a budget. Let it guide your spending choices. Be content within your means and don't spend more than you make. Avoid debt like you would avoid a termite infestation in your house. Give faithfully to God as your highest priority. Don't go away. We're going to be right back with our panel to dig into our points. Welcome back. So glad you could stay with us. I want to bring in our panel now as we unpack these points for planning for success and building a good, successful future. And anytime you talk about success, it occurs to me that you have to define success, right? And this lesson is really approaching the idea of success from the idea of financial or economic success. So then again, you have to ask, what is financial success? And I would like to cast this in the idea of economic or financial stability instead of necessarily using the word success. Because I think we can understand the idea of financial stability a little more readily than perhaps success, because everyone has a different idea of what financial success look like. And regardless of socioeconomic status, you can still be stable and content. And I believe that is really the key of what we're talking about here. Whether you're on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale with less dollars in your regular bank account or on the upper end, you can still be stable and content within whatever situation God has put in there for you. Let's begin about talking that foundation. If anyone has ever had foundation troubles in their house, you know what a nightmare that can be. It's expensive to correct. It causes all kinds of problems you wouldn't expect, from, doors not shutting properly to cracks in the walls and the ceilings. It just makes a mess. And if you don't get that foundation right, that building is never going to be right. There are 2 main things that I think make a really good foundation for financial security and success. That is education and a good, stable marriage. There's a story in Matthew 7:24 through 27 of the wise man who built his house on the rock versus the foolish man who built it on the sand. And that goes right to our idea of foundation. If you are like the foolish man and build on the sand, well, when the storms of life come, you know what happens. It beats and it all falls down. And 2 Corinthians tells us, don't be unequally yoked. I mean, if one of you is building on a rock or trying to, and the other one of you is wanting to build on the sand, you can see what that's going to do to the house you're building, right? What do you guys think?
Having had foundation issues in the past, that can be a very scary thing. One moment you have a nice concrete footing there, and the next minute it's just sliding off, and you notice your house or your building is collapsing over. And Jesus' words really ring true on this one, don't they? I mean, it's not just about your finances, Daniel. You said it. It's about your marriage. It's about your relationships with others. Unless there's something stable there underneath to really hold it up. And in this case, the sure word of God is got to be that stabilizing factor for us.
Yeah. I've never lived in a place with foundation issues, but when planning to buy, I've been under a place with the inspector and noticing things. And he basically told me, do not buy this place. Don't. Because he found some things underneath that building, the crawl space, that he said that this is just going to crumble around you.
Yeah, when we were selling our last house, the inspectors came in and they discovered that there were some foundation issues, and we had to go ahead and get that repaired. And it was expensive enough that we had to have that paid for out of the money we were getting for the sale. So the title company had to handle writing the contractor the check for that to handle it. It's no fun dealing with foundation issues, and you gotta start somewhere strong and firm. Knowing what we really ought to know is a great start with that, education in that, and then whoever we are paired up with, we need to be on the same page. We need to be going in the same direction with things, even having the same idea, not just of what the foundation should be made out of, whether it be on the rock or on the sand, but even into a direction of how big is this foundation going to be, what kind of structure is going to be built on it, so that we know how much concrete to pour for that foundation. What is it going to take to really have that basis to take care of the rest of our lives as well.
If I could just jump in and push even a little further on this idea, it's not even so much about the size of the structure. Sometimes the smaller things have to have a firm foundation as well. I'll give you an example. I live in Northwest Arkansas, and when we bought our house there a few years ago, I decided to build a fence. We bought a brand new construction house, and so it didn't have a fence or anything. And when we were buying it, we tried to get them to do it for us, and they said no. And in retrospect, I'm glad they didn't, because something as simple as a fence, if it's not dug correctly, if it's not founded correctly, the whole fence will come down. Regulations for a fence in Arkansas, from what I could tell, they only required a 22-inch depth for your 4x4 posts as supports. And I dug mine to 30 inches. And I got a lot of criticism, and people made fun of me. They said, hey, you're going to 30 inches? What a waste of extra concrete and resources. But I'll tell you, the next year, across the street, another neighbor built their house. They built their fence. They had a contractor come in. That contractor only went to 16 inches, trying to save money on concrete and depth. And so all that money that they saved, 6 months later, there was a very strong windstorm that came through. And my fence was the only fence left completely undamaged in the entire neighborhood. Several neighbors had to replace, boards and pickets sections. But the neighbor across the street, brand new fence, 16-inch depth, he had to completely replace his. The wind was so strong, it actually pulled the foundation, the concrete, out of the ground. And I think that makes a difference. Even the small things we need to take into consideration and make sure that we're firmly founded, especially when you translate that into the spiritual side of our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you pointed out, sometimes those little things that you think, or maybe you cross your fingers and hope don't make a difference,
Yeah.
and they come back to either support you or bite you later. And
Yeah.
speaking of education, I was blessed with parents who had that commitment to Adventist Christian education, and they kept me in those schools and made sure that they followed up and reinforced my education. And that has been such a blessing to me ever since.
Yeah.
It's so many times in so many ways that I can't even count, that I've been thankful that I have a really good educational background.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, one of the things.
That's not so chic.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right.
I was saying that's I guess a not so shameful plug for Adventist education. That if you, if you live anywhere near a church school, do what it takes to get into a church school. And if you don't think you can, if you're in one of those spots where you think, oh, I wish I could, talk to your pastor, reach out. There are ways that your church family can help make that happen for you. Don't live your life in that place of, oh, I wish I could, but I just don't think I can.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about our schools, and I believe especially here in our conference, the Arkansas Louisiana Conference, is their willingness to work with people on finances to get them into those educational places. And that's one of those things that comes up to building a quality structure and making sure we're planning for what we want to do. When we're talking about a family, I mean, you mentioned in that first part on foundation of education and a marriage, a strong marriage, being able to plan and know how you want to raise and educate children, how you want to take care of children is going to be an important thing with that. And we need to be diligent about how we raise the family and watch over and take care of the family, and not just for success, but for financial success, but for spiritual success as well.
It never ceases.
You mentioned.
Sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
That you mentioned that diligence that's required to keep going, and I think that brings us really nicely into our second point. That having that foundation, now you still have to pay really good attention to building that quality structure. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I just love the emphasis that you guys are putting on the Christian home, especially with regard to kids. Daniel, you and I have been friends for many, many years. Your dad was a teacher in our school system, and of course we went to high school together. Oh, I think we only overlapped 1 year of high school and 1 year of college, but still, we've been friends for many, many years now, and more than I care to admit that I'm that old. And Keith, I've had the privilege of being in your church and meeting your wife and daughter, and she is full of energy. She's just a great little kid. And I've got two kids. My oldest is now in college, and my youngest is in the 6th grade. But the emphasis is that if we don't give these kids that foundation, I can't help but think of Proverbs where it talks about teaching the child in the way they should go so that when they're old, they won't depart from it. And children today, I think, are undervalued. Even though I don't hear it like I did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, maybe you guys remember hearing children should be seen and not heard. My kids didn't get that memo. Man, when we go over to somebody's house, my kids are in the middle of the conversation, and I'm glad that they are. I want them to be a part of everything. I want them to be a part of what's going on. But I also want them to have that solid, sure foundation so that when they get to the place where they're not relying on their mom and dad, that they're still going to be making wise and discerning and spiritual choices.
Yeah, that's a big part of building a quality structure that we have to do is modeling what that looks like.
Yes.
And, biblically, we were created as a species, humanity. God created us to work. We weren't just set to take our ease, but we were made to work. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 really exemplifies this well. It says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. It wasn't just a nice place to be able to relax and take ease, but it was a place of purpose. And we have purpose, and we need to set out to do work. And the Bible is full of instruction that we are to be working as we are able, and as God has gifted us to do. We should be working, and that's a big part of what it takes for kind of building that structure and a quality structure. Is it takes dedication and work. Recently, my wife and I had the windows on our house replaced, and the windows that were put in, the house is still fairly new construction. I think we were the second owner of the house, but the windows were as inexpensive as they could possibly be while looking high end. And the window people who came in, they said, yeah, these are contractor grade windows. They're good, but they're not great. And we ended up deciding to have those windows replaced. And one of the things that the people who came in and did the work on the windows said is like, hey, your guys' house is built really strong. We haven't seen a lot of houses that are done this way, that the quality put into the walls of the house, that everything was straight, things were well sealed and insulated, and everything that they were expecting out of a high quality house, they were able to find. And that was something that really spoke to me, with that we were able to find something that had this good value to it and be able to get good value for our money for the house. And it required work on behalf of, actually, it was our neighbor who was the one who built this house. He has a contracting company, and he's been building houses in our neighborhood. And his work ethic really showed through in the quality that was found there, and inspires me when I'm doing work on my house to make sure that I'm coming in with a high quality job to match what he put into it initially.
So good.
Yeah, isn't that always so gratifying to hear when someone who's in a position to know says, "Oh, your this is really well done," or "really good condition," or "good quality"? It's just like, "Oh, yes."
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think for a lot of us that who are parents, that your children are so well behaved, they're such good kids, is right up there as well.
You know, sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I was just going to say that, having that reputation for good work yourself, that you build up through that good, honest labor, is something that'll really carry you through the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, sometimes when we're talking on here, I'm realizing this is my first time. You guys do it all the time. Sometimes I don't hear you until I'm already talking. You have to bear with me while I get used to this. You're talking about integrity, and you're talking about working. The lesson brought out Laban and Jacob and their relationship. And guys, I'm just going to be honest with you. I can't imagine working for 14 years for a wife and ending up with two of them. Jacob did. But the thing about it is that the one of the texts that we had to read mentioned that it just felt like it was a couple of days to Jacob, and I think that while that can very much refer and relate to the love that he had for Rachel, I think there's something else there as well. Jacob enjoyed his work. There seems to be evidence in the way that he took care of the flocks, and the way that he mastered their offspring and their breeding and so forth. And since it seems that he enjoyed his work, also that adds to it. When we enjoy what we're doing, sometimes I have to pinch myself that I get paid to do what I do, and that sometimes it's tough. Sometimes there's blood, sweat, and tears, right? When we pastor, there's always those times, but in a general setting, I'm like, man, I get paid to do this. This is so wonderful. And so there's something to be said for that in the integrity of the way we live, we work, we relate, and all of that goes back to not just having a solid foundation, but that also has a solid structure, a quality structure that we work and we live within that framework.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it speaks also to the dignity of work itself. I know a lot of people who seem to think that the pinnacle achievement in life is to get yourself to some sort of place where you don't work. Like that's the whole point of putting in some effort or investing in a get rich quick scheme so you can get rich and you don't have to work. But really what we're saying here is it is the work, it is the labor itself, which is spiritually valuable and builds you up for success in the future. Right. It's not the end game to suddenly get rich so you don't have to work.
I just saw a TikTok that said, I didn't want to work 9 to 5, so I got my own company. Now I work 24/7.
Yeah, right.
There's a trend that is often referred to as FIRE. It's financial independence, retire early. And a lot of millennials have really targeted that. And there's millennials out there who they really went after it early on, built a strong foundation in their education and such, and retired at the age of 35. And not just to no longer do anything, but they had now a financial base. They sacrificed a lot through their 20s and early 30s, but they had now the financial base to put their hand to the work that they wanted to do, not necessarily based on what it would pay, but what it would do. I know I've had some jobs in my life that weren't always the most pleasant, but I was always able to find some level of joy in them by not making the work my passion, but taking what my passion is and applying it to the work that I was doing.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah. And I think no matter what it is that's in front of you that you're doing, you can find some aspect of it, something about it that you can pour your passion into and just do it with excellence.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the keys for what you had said was your third point of maintaining the structure and not undermining it, is that we have to be passionate about what we've built so that we will continue to keep it going and not just, oh, here's another thing that I have to do now, but really have that mindset of the passion of protecting what we've created, the life we create, and the life we invest in.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a nice segue into our third point here, that once you've gotten started with your structure and have it built out, you really have to maintain it. Just like you maintain a home. And I don't know if anybody else grew up being told, don't slam the door. No. Well, there's a reason for that, because it damages things. And, over time, it's going to cause a problem. And there are things in our family life and our spiritual life and our financial life that you do and you don't do as well.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that the lesson brought out is this idea of seeking godly counsel as we're seeking to maintain these structures that we've built. And Thursday's lesson began by the gurus out there, the financial investment gurus, these people that have made money. And I don't want to call any names. I think there's wisdom that we can have by listening to some of these folks. But I think we also need to understand that some of these folks are more interested in making themselves wealthy through their program that they've created for you to buy into, than they are in securing your financial freedom as well. And I know my wife and I, a few years ago, we sold a house that took us 2 years to pay off. I mean, we lost so much money on it. It was a house that we bought after the crash in 2008. We bought it cheap, thinking the economy would come back. But 4 years later, where we were, it didn't come back, and we just weren't able to sell it. Just about bankrupted us. Finally got it sold, and it took me 6 years to pay off the debt that I incurred from those 2 years of having to carry that second house. And there's a lot more details in there. Somebody's sitting there going, "Wow, that just doesn't add up." Yeah, the details are the details. The point is that while we were in that time of our life, we were looking for somebody to help us, give us good advice on how to get out from under this monster debt that we have. Because when you're on fixed incomes like we are, as pastors, you get to a certain point of debt and you'll never climb out of it, because it just the interest and everything else can become too great of a hill. And so we were seeking help. And one of the people that we went to get help wanted us to spend $3,000 more for them to help us get out of our hole. And I said, that just doesn't even make sense to me. There are many people who live paycheck to paycheck. And if you're one of them, I just want to encourage you and say, hey, look, it's not the end of the world. God will provide, and God does provide. And being reliant on God is sometimes a lot better than being reliant on the next paycheck, because God is faithful and He always comes through. But if that is you, try to spend less money than you earn. Try to save a little bit if you can every month. And I love how the lesson said, avoid debt like the plague, COVID-19. And it's just, there may be times when you can't help it. I couldn't help it when I sold my house. I had to take on debt because that was the only way I was getting out from that mess. But try to avoid it as much as you can. But when you do take it on, work hard to get out from under it as well. And my wife and I did. We worked very hard to get out from under it. And a couple of years ago, we finally made it to a point where we were living debt free, except for the car payment and the house payment. And some financial gurus will tell you still have debt if you have a car payment, and that's true. You probably do. But as long as you buy wisely and you spend well, the Lord will bless. And then you got to be financially faithful with God. Don't forget to be faithful to God. Our time is almost up here, guys, but I'd be remiss if I didn't tell my own experience. The conference sent me to the seminary years ago, and if you guys remember seminary experience, back in those days, they only gave us when I went, they gave us an $800 stipend. My house that I rented was $600 and my car payment was $250. By my math, I'm $50 to the bad, and I hadn't even started. Haven't paid for the car insurance, hadn't bought groceries, haven't done anything. And my wife and I said, what in the world are we going to do? Well, I want you to know I never missed a month of paying my tithe, returning a faithful 10%. And we gave a second offering of 5%, and then we gave a little above that. So it was close to a double tithe. And some months it was more than a double tithe. Sometimes it was like 18%. It just depended. But the second offering that we gave was always a love offering. And I can tell you that there were times when I gave the tithe to the Lord, dropped it in the plate at church, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to pay the electric bill that month, or I needed tires on my car, or whatever. But I can tell you in retrospect, the bills have always been paid. I've never missed a meal. I remember one time I put the tithe in the offering plate, and the next day, Monday, the next business day, on Monday, there was a check in my mailbox for the exact amount of tithe that I just put in, which was the exact amount of money that I needed for my car tires. These stories are out there. God is faithful. God is faithful. I can't say it enough. God is faithful, and He will provide for you. And understanding God's faithfulness is as much as maintaining the structure as any of the rest of it is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And, I've got stories too, like you said, we don't have time for, but I really appreciate what you said about, if someone is in that spot where they're just struggling and they're not sure how to get out of it, it's not the end of the world. There is help. And maybe you're having issues trying to figure out how to work a budget and stick to it. Reach out for help. As a pastor, I have helped countless people figure it out and figure out a system that works for them. So reach out to your pastor, reach out to one of us, and let someone know. And they, with their experience, can guide you to a better place, and God will absolutely bless. Hey everyone, thanks you so much for joining us. We are out of that time for this session of Sabbath School Perspectives, and we just hope that you have really enjoyed it, that you have found something useful, and if so, give us a like, subscribe, share, and hey, drop something in the comments about some stories that you have where God has blessed you when you have been faithful, to encourage everyone who watches this. Until next time, we hope you are blessed as you plan for your future with God.